Right, so look, here's Bridgen, right? And he's just come on the channel on YouTube, which is for his political party that he's in with Lawrence Fox, Reclaim the Media. And by the way, whatever's showing on the screen here, down below, I'm not responsible for that. That's just to do with whatever YouTube put on there. Look, there's Dr. Campbell. So, look, this is where I am with the whole thing. I mean, to do with being on TV in politics, right? Ofcom have got these guidelines, which Professor Tim Wilson has outlined these guidelines, and the select committee pulled up Ofcom because the select committee was saying that Ofcom weren't applying the guidelines properly, right? But those guidelines don't actually cover for all of the legislation which is in effect. Those guidelines seem to gloss over or even fail to acknowledge legislation which is in place. Now, I like Bridgen and I like Lawrence Fox and the Reclaim Party, but the name of it, however it popped into Lawrence Fox's head, wherever it came from, wherever he conjured it up from himself, or whether it was whispered, Chinese whispers or whatever, it seems almost like the Jacob Rees-Mogg anthem. Claim back the media for the MPs are not supposed to be on there. Yes, but we'll claim it back and we will be on there. You know, I like Reclaim Party, but it's a coincidence, or too much of a coincidence, that really, as the legislation sits, it's a very, very awkward situation. And it's probably as awkward and ridiculous as it is with the WHO threatening to take his rights away. Now, this is how I see it, right? So, all this legislation is being put there in place through time. But everything's changed. The game's changed now with technology, devices. I don't think the legislation has kept up with it. Even Nick Clegg, the global president for Facebook, was saying to Mark Zuckerberg, the politicians aren't even keeping up with us with the legislation. Well, they're not, because they're putting all much influence and advertising psychology into us now that they're having a malleable effect on our minds and behaviour quicker than and probably even the MPs. I mean, I don't even think these MPs know how they're being manipulated by the media, by algorithms, adverts popping up on their phones, and God knows whatever hacking themselves. So it's almost like a killer circle, a killer loop. It's like oxygen. It's almost like photosynthesis on trees. And if the politicians can't see what's going on and recognise it, it's almost like me when I'm going and eating a pork pie and then eating another one, and then parents just keep bringing them in and I can't stop myself. And at some point, I can see this is happening. I'm doing this action. I'm doing it. I can see what's happening. And then, if I don't change the behaviour, then I'm not, even if I'm become aware, I'm doing this thing and it's bad and I need to stop doing it. But if I can't stop myself, the observations have no value. It's almost like going around in a merry-go-round and you think you need to get off, but if it's going round and round, I mean, what do? It's almost like, to have to get out of a moving car, when you're not driving, I need to get out, you wait for it to stop, or, you're going to open the door and, wait till there's a patch of grass coming past and time it, or what? You need to put some brakes on. You need some grounding. You need some grip. You need something to stop. If you haven't got the psychological will, or if there's influences around you which are too great, you can't. And you might as well not be aware of it. It might as well. And then there's people. You're the one who's worried, like, what's going on? I know what's going on, but I can't stop this. But people around you have got the blinders on, and they're just joining. Hey, don't worry, have another drink. You need to snap these people out of it and all work together. The way I see it with the media at the moment, right, is this: we had the BBC, and it was paid for by the public, right? It was paid for by the licence fee to inform, educate and entertain. But then we also had BBC Two. That's still the BBC. And then we got these independent channels like ITV, International Television, and Channel 4. And we had radio, which was also mainly the BBC. BBC One, Two, national stations, and then we had the local stations, which was, guess what, BBC Norwich, BBC Coventry, BBC Cumbria, whatever, BBC. But then you've got these commercial stations. Now, the commercial stations are all funded by advertisements for products of very rich people with a lot of money who want to advertise products. And those commercial stations have interests. They play the music that's popular and out there that people want to hear, but ultimately they're private. Now, this is the thing. Through history, we've always had town criers. Hear ye, message from the government. All come to the town square. Yea, hear that Andrew Bridgen MP is running for council and his opponent is Mr. Biggins of the Labour Party, or whatever it is, right? That's a town crier on behalf of the council. He ain't selling burgers. Now, we've also got the newspapers. But these newspapers are privately owned, the press. And the thing is, we've had those newspapers a lot longer than the radio and TV. Now, with the press, there's a certain legislation in effect, because when policemen do the job, they need uniforms and they need paper and pens to write. And when the government need to write legislation, they need pens. Now, if no one in the country will sell them pens, they can't write any new laws down. So, the government has to be able to say, right, give me some pens. What if W.H. Smiths refuse to sell them any? We're not going to get far writing any new legislation down, are we? So they're compelled to provide pens, whether it's by a royal appointment or not, right? Now, the thing is, right, that with the press, there needs to be certain messages given to the public, like the town crier, hear ye, because it's a compulsory requirement that we hear those messages. We have to, because it's a necessity. And also certain legal messages and so forth, like you are required to come to the jury. Now, if the postal service don't deliver the letters, then the government can't function. And if the newspapers don't publish the notices that say the A1 is closed for 3 weeks, then you can't function because you don't know the A1 is closed for 3 weeks. So they're compelled to give service for function of country. And that obligation really falls under Companies House, because they can't even have a company and be registered with the government to trade unless they've got a fucking lemonade stand or something, or you've got a spare pheasant for your neighbour, or change a cup of milk or a cup of sugar or whatever. They're only allowed to have a business under the Crown with a certificate of incorporation or limited company, limited to what they can and can't do. They've got to pay taxes and they've got to give our rights. Under that, they have to provide service, mainly for government function. And really, there's no reason, to, not want to sell John milk, but sell Paul milk. We've got trading standards and consumer rights for general things anyway, but function of government is required. And that is where we got to in America in the 1700s with the freedom of the press is added to the freedom of speech. Or we can't operate when it comes to voting in elections, legal cases and political things. And this is what Paul Groves and the geekoids in the new Mark Zuckerberg world of taking over the planet don't understand. Because they've only got money because it's the money, they're wanting to create their own money now, like, ethers and Bitcoin and God knows whatever. They don't realise that money with the picture of the monarch on, and on the other side, Churchill or whoever it is, right? That is the money of the state. And Zuckerberg has stocked up money only because he's been allowed to have a company and he's been allowed to trade under the rules of the country, and he's paid tax and he's done very well and flogged a lot of advertisements, 50 zillion impressions, which probably were wasted everyone's time, and they paid him a shitload of money. And yes, he's a bit of a whiz on the computer and he can do a bit of coding and a bit of designing, but who can't, a little bit of computer coding and a little bit of, and now I'll go see my experts and some novel technologies, and next thing, I'm controlling the planet, I'm in control of the universe. Well, no, actually, I'm not, Mark, because, apparently they did terrible recently. The thing is that these companies, there's an agreement with society, and they don't think there is an agreement with society anymore. They think that they own the world just because they've got a number, a big number with lots of zeros behind it. I've got lots of money. I can do anything. Well, actually, you can't. You could have a terrorist. I'm not a terrorist, but this is an example. You could have a random person, an imaginary person, who happened to have 15 million. I mean, I shouldn't really be saying this in this video because it'll probably be conjuring up algorithms and flags, but I'll make it explicit. This is in theory. You could have, look at Putin or whatever. He's got a country and an army. So he other countries have to be cautious of him. That's why we need navy ships and, aircraft carriers and so forth. Now, if any Tom, Dick and Harry, like in, Casino Royale or, whatever film it is, happen to have themselves, an army and loads of, armed force, they can do things. So that's what a lot of James Bond films are based on, because they've got a force. Now, within our own country, we don't have a force. We're meant to operate, fairly in consent. But now we seem to be having a force that's creeping in through these devices, and it's not a force that fires bullets and pokes you with pointy sticks. It's a force that forces itself into your life and listens in and gathers information on you, and then all the things that you're buying are their devices, and it's not really yours anymore, because then they add things on that they want on it, not necessarily what you want on it, and have to make you agree to it, submitting consent after you've kind of like already got it, and then you depend on it, and then they can do what they want, because it's almost like if they got you hooked on oxygen. It's like on, basically, I mean, this is all been played out before, like in Total Recall, when they've got, he steals the oxygen away. You've got all these devices and now you depend on them and need them, then they can do what they want, because if they take them away, or if you don't update, if you don't, get the latest device or the latest app, they'll make it so it doesn't work. It's almost like taking the oxygen away, which is what they did on Total Recall, on Mars. They took the oxygen away and they were just like feeding them a little bit of oxygen. So, they've given us all the tech now, we depend on it, but they want it because it gives them they can basically plan the world and predict, dictate and plan everything that's going to happen and what you can and can't do through it. Now, going back to, we're going a bit off track here, trying to get back on track again, right? So, look, freedom of the press, there's a right to use the press for things that are required, like legal cases, of which petitions are a legal case, and public consultations, giving certain notices, right? That's the press. They're private, but they're private in a consensual realm, society, which we all consent to agree with, and there are rules. Now, those rules are there so that model and framework can operate. Now, if you are, and that goes for materials as well, because to print, you need ink and paper, even if you don't get a newspaper to print it. If you want to do 1,000 flyers in your local area, you could write them out by hand and then walk around and post them through the letterbox. But if they don't sell you the pen, you can't do it, right? So, but it's a legal case to the government, so you have to have the pen. You know, what happens if the government sends you a form? You've been summoned and you've got to fill it in and complete it, and you've got no pen. You go to the shop and he won't sell you a pen. How are you going to fill the summons in? Or fill your data in and return it to the court? You show them in the shop and say, I need this pen for a legal process, right? You sell me it now, or you perverting the course of justice, right? People it's taken for granted. It's taken for granted. They just don't realise actually how there are these things that are it's just glossed over, overlooked, taken for granted now. Now, when it comes to the media, we had the BBC and we all pay for it. So it can't be commandeered really by the Labour Party. You can't have Keir Starmer go on the BBC and just say, I'm just going to have this run for the Labour Party. We'll have Labour Party candidates on all the time, Labour Party programmes, and all these programmes will be in line with Labour Party policies, because you can't do that. Because it would be like the political party taking over the television, and then everyone would be told what that party thinks and does. So they're not allowed on there. We elect them to go into Parliament and do a job, and when we see them through the surgeries and the debate in Parliament. We can listen to their debates, so be reported on what happened in the debates and so forth. Now, on television, they answer questions. They have them on, and, what have you been doing in Parliament? Oh, well, we put this bill through and we put that bill through, and so many people voted for this or wanted that. They're informing us. We ask them. That's what they're there for. The station is paid for by the taxpayer. Now, this is why the BBC have impartiality, or supposed to have impartiality, although you've got the BBC as being infiltrated by Tory and Labour, but it claims that it's impartial. Now, the main stations are privately owned. Now, but the thing is, like, if you've got the ITV and Channel 4, you can't have the ITV and Channel 4 run just willy-nilly, because what happens if someone who likes the Tory party just bought Channel 4 and ITV and said, we'll have this all for Tories, and then you would have the BBC, which is impartial, up against these big stations which were pushing Tory. And that, again, would be an unfair advantage. Even if it's fully funded by the Tories, and even if everyone were buying Tory products that were selling on it, the stations, the MP's job is a politician in Parliament, and they get paid for it. Now, we allow them to have another job if they want, but that's their main job. Now, this is the problem with Rees-Mogg, right? He needs to decide what his main job is. Is his main job an MP? Does he want to be a career politician? That's his main job. But he's got this other thing called Somerset Investments, when he's got various companies doing various Somerset Capital, right? And he's doing business. Now, the problem is that he is suggesting things and debating things, whether he's in the cabinet or not, in Parliament, and this benefits his company. Now, he's going close to a very, very, very red line, because if you work as a mayor or a councillor or anything through government and you are commissioning anything to be done with taxpayer money, you're meant to be doing it for the people, not for you or your party. You're meant to be doing it for the people, even if your party's, in charge of the council, but not yourself. This is why, if you are commissioning things and making decisions, you're not supposed to be personally benefiting from it, and that includes if you own a business. So, and that is a principle. You look through at all of the old acts of law. You can't do it. Now, these MPs like Jacob Rees-Mogg, particularly Tory ones, who have businesses and invest in businesses, not mainly like Labour politicians, like Jeremy Corbyn style of a politician, when his job is a politician. He wants to be a politician. That's his job. That's what he gets paid for. That's what he lives for. He doesn't live to do his politician job so he can personally make a shitload of money and do business, because that's not his job. If he wanted to do that, why would he get a job as a politician? Why wouldn't he just set up a butcher shop or a pheasant trading company or an importers or a shipping company, like Branson? He wants to be a politician, right? Even if, that party has policies which are pro for businesses, he himself, personally, Corbyn, doesn't really exist to have a business. He exists to be a politician for how the whole country should be run for everyone. Now, the thing is, there were legislation was made so that politicians are politicians and doing a job. Now, they were allowed to have another job because, they might not be making that much money. But how it's written in the law, it's talking about, the primary income. Now, the thing with Mogg is, if he had a bookshop, right, because he didn't, he wasn't happy with how much he made as a politician, and Rees-Mogg had a little bookshop in Bath or in Bristol, right, he would be all right. Because Rees-Mogg, they're wanting to double the pay anyway in Parliament. He gets paid, and his primary job is a politician. Now, if he's a bit short for cash and he wishes he had more money, then he could have a bookshop in Bristol. But when he's getting 85 or 185,000 or whatever football star salary chucked at him just for sitting in the chair and moving his mouth, it then becomes his major income. Right? And it overtakes his parliamentary income. So he's getting paid more. But it's not his main job. He is the MP for that area. That's what his main job is. Forget what his main salary is. That is his main job. If it ain't enough money, then he wants to go get a job what is enough money. If Sunak ain't raising the money enough. Right? So that's a deception, because we know it's his main job. Now, in the law, it says that what the law says is that essentially politicians can be invited onto television to answer questions about what they're up to, what they're doing. Question them, or to give announcements or notices for things like the A1's closed for 5 weeks, right? But they're not meant to take over the station or take the direction of the channel or station. Why? Because it's a capital. It is a capital with a lot of power to influence the country. And firstly, the BBC is meant to be for everyone, not for one political party, so no one owns it and controls it. And the other commercial channels, they're not meant to be taken over by a political party, or not the politicians who are in Parliament. Anyway, people who support them might own the channel, Tories might own the channel, but the MPs who are making and changing the laws aren't meant to take over the channel, because their capital is Parliament, London, the workings of government. The station's privately owned, right? We've elected them, we're giving them capital of Parliament and executive decisions in Parliament to run the country. That's their capital. They're not on top of that, privately, you're not adding privately owned broadcasting things into it, all for one party. That's the thing. Now, if these smartphones and YouTube were invented from the start, before the printing press, it might have been different, but they weren't. We had like a few channels, until, cable in America and Sky TV and then flicking through channel after channel. And now you've got YouTube where any Tom, Dick and Harry has got a channel. So everyone can have a voice, depending on what the algorithms are. Now, just imagine if YouTube itself, and this is what we're getting onto, you've got to look at YouTube like the BBC, because if Neil Mohan and YouTube itself happen to, we know that it's been controlled by BlackRock Vanguard and that it's got corporate interests. That's the problem. But imagine if YouTube at the start would have had YouTube instead of the BBC and the old-fashioned radio, and absolutely everyone and anyone could have been on there, not just a very small number of stations and controlled things, right? Anyone could have been on there. Well, it would have been all right because everyone's got the capital to do what they want, right? Just like, it would even have been cheaper than the printing press. But what happens if the people who control YouTube will control what channels pop up on the screen? Who sees what channel? What are the algorithms? What is coming up best in search? What's getting suggested? And then there's shadow banning all the other ones. Then they've got political control. It's saying, you're not allowed on, you're not allowed on, you're not allowed on. Or we don't want people listening to this. And what if some of those were the political pies? Then YouTube, Google, Mohan will be in control of the political influence of the country. And that is why the BBC at the start had to be impartial. That's the point. Now, we seem to have come to a point where anyone can have a channel, and those major stations are losing the wider influence, the wider net on attention, because all other channels are now getting attention. But now they're still wanting to try and censor and control things and take things down that are meant to be politically protected. That's the reason. The legislation says that it says that if you're a politician, really you should only be going on TV to answer questions or to make appearances. You shouldn't be part of that channel, or not permanent part of it, or guiding it. Particularly around referendums and election time. Because it's too great a capital to be having. Even if you were to do it fairly on, have one from each party on there. Because they're not. Parliament is if the government want to issue a notice, we pay the tax so they can put NHS billboards on every bus shelter. That's what we pay for. So why are they going? Why do they need to go? Why does Rees-Mogg need to go on GB News to say what he wants if he's got a message from Parliament, message from the King, message from the King, message from Mogg, then he can put it on a bus shelter saying this is a message from government because we pay for it. But we don't pay for GB News. The Tories pay for it. And when it's election time, the parties get sponsors and money and so forth for their campaigns. But it's printing up leaflets in your local area at election time. You don't generally see MPs putting out leaflets when it's not election time, because once they're elected, their position's safe and they don't need to put any more leaflets out until it's the next election time or if there's a referendum. And once they're elected, they're representing everyone, including the people who didn't vote for them. All of the people who didn't vote for them, like now it's over half the public, they've got a representative in the surgery. They didn't vote for them, but then they're stuck with them. So they're their representative. You're our MP, even though half of us didn't vote for you. So, but he's now representing half the people who didn't vote for him. So he's got to do it fairly between everyone, because he's been elected to represent everyone, not just the people who vote for him. Now, when a political party owns a station and it's just doing what it wants, it's not representing the people who don't like it and who didn't vote for it, I can tell you that, unless it's the impartial BBC, supposedly impartial BBC, right? That's the thing. Currently, the legislation does say that things that MPs say, if it's going to influence people in voting, then it's not meant to be on there. Anything to do with the elections and voting, other than basic information that there's something going on. Now, their role is to update and inform on what they've done and what they've been asked to do, and to give notices out and so forth, which is why they're meant to have a right in the newspaper. But it's not meant to be the MPs, at the least, aren't supposed to be the ones who try and persuade people what to do in voting, because they're in the Parliament actually doing it and putting it through. So, they're trying to get people to support what they're doing. We are meant to tell them what to do, and then they're meant to really be doing what we tell them based on figures, right? The channels have got their own opinions, but it's really, when it's the BBC and paid for by us, it's meant to show equal opinions. So, and the problem is, once you get presenters on television and they're there all the time, how can they? It was all, when there's various different elections and referendums coming in and going out and coming in and going out all the time, it would almost be like Rees-Mogg would have to be doing an assault course, like some sort of contortionist or acrobat, to dodge the subjects and, better not ask this question or better not ask that question. It's just too complicated. If Rees-Mogg is on GB News all the time with a permanent position, he would have to duck and dodge elections and referendums and material of that, like some sort of acrobat, which I don't think it's actually possible. And to make it simple, that's why he's not supposed to be on there, right? Particularly when he's an elected MP, and one of the main criteria for not being on there is if you're a Minister of the Crown, which makes it easier, because simply, if you're a Minister of the Crown, and it's privately owned station, then you shouldn't be on there, because where should you be? In Parliament. That's the thing. Or in your surgery. Or clearly, if that's not your main job, or your primary income, then maybe on a Tuesday evening at 3:30, you should be in his bookshop in Bristol, not, raking in, money off the beach. Oh, look, there's £1 million just washed up on the shore on the beach in a suitcase. What's your job? I'm a fisherman. I'm raking in money. Well, how much are you making? Billions. It's my primary income now. I can retire. I don't need to be an MP in Parliament. I'll just do that for a bit of a laugh on a Tuesday after I, pull some strings in Parliament to, get the, fishing net taxes reduced. So it costs me less to catch all this money from the suitcases coming up on the beach. This is it. There's a principle. Now, if modern technology and the mobile phones has introduced a much more greater capital for everyone to be able to have a voice and be heard, then maybe we don't need that legislation anymore. But we've got it, and they haven't got rid of it yet. But they just start to gloss over it and overlook it. That's not my problem, that's their problem. And the other problem is that even if we didn't have that legislation, even if it could say, MPs can even, the Tories can own every station they want and nothing's publicly owned, then the problem is that even trying to censor the opposition now even on the open platform of YouTube, they're taking down stuff. So that's even worse than being, how can you get any worse than, unlawfully having MPs on the TV is unlawfully having MPs on the TV, and then the MPs and their pals are unlawfully taking people off the station and the airwaves and censoring them. That's even worse. That's almost like taking a pee in the pool and then stabbing everyone in it and watching it fill with blood. It's, or even banning everyone from the pool. This is it. Now, MPs can issue notices and they can print leaflets and give advertisements. But the thing is, if it's an advertisement for a political party, like on commercial, they've got a right to put an advertisement on a commercial station as much as anyone can advertise a bag of chips on a commercial station. But that's what it is. Here is an advertisement from a political party. Not when it's just, oh, look, it's Philip Schofield and, Graham Norton. Oh, we'll just have the whole Tory party on. In fact, you might as well go home, Norton. Let's have Boris on. Now, the Boris Johnson show. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm running the capital of England with the capital where the taxpayers paying. Well, but it's not enough. It's not enough. I have to take over the entire station myself. This is it. They want everything. And these people have got everything, and it's got to a point now where they just don't want everything. They want everything to go their way, and if everything isn't going their way, then they see it as a loss, as damage. Even when they're sat planning, now, they've got everything you could possibly want in the world. They've got it now. And they're writing on paper what they want next, their Christmas list to Santa. And next year we want to make a projected profit of 59 billion. And then we want to make these things and put these on the phones, on that of the phone. They don't even exist yet. This is like their want list. This is their Santa list. This is Boris and Cameron and the Tory and YouTube and Zuckerberg's wish list. Santa list. It doesn't even exist yet. Now, when you are doing things that are going to take away from their wish list, they're now considering it as damage. You're stealing from them. You're damaging you're damaging my organisation, Mr. Bond. It's damage, and they're suing for things that they haven't even done yet and what they haven't even got yet. We've got nothing. They've got everything and more. And they're acting like, if you're damaging my plans, Mr. Bond, my plans. What about the damage to our health? They actually done it. And where's that? Future health. You've damaged our future health, projected health. So we're gonna sue in those courts. The NHS is going to sue McDonald's, KFC, and every single company owned by BlackRock Vanguard. You've damaged our health, actual bodily damage. And the projected health on the current trajectory is damage. You are going to be sued for it. Never mind damaging their projected profits, you've actually damaged their health and wealth. Now that is where Jeremy Corbyn needs to be. That is what Jeremy Corbyn's position should be with the CPS. If the CPS worked behind Starmer, who seems to be enjoying the whole thing. Powerhouses. What's the point in having a powerhouse when you've got no power because your sperm counts drop through the bottom of the floor and you're rolling around like a donut? And you've taken away human rights. What's the point in having a human rights lawyer? We don't have one anymore. They're going to courts and suing for their wish list because we're threatening their wish list. They haven't even got it yet. This might have it. We know what we've got. Death, 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 death. That's what we've got. And we're going to sue them for it.